This is JoCAT, the home of the Creative Arts Therapy Research Community. Welcome to our podcasts. Adrian Jackson is a theatre director, playwright, and founder of Cardboard Citizens, who produce work particularly by, with, and for those who have experienced homelessness. He recently visited Auckland, and Amelia Yiakmis seized the opportunity to invite him to create this podcast for JoCAT listeners. After completing a postgraduate diploma in expressive therapies in Sydney in 2008, Amelia moved to Aotearoa and discovered the Hobson Street Theatre Company, which partners with the Auckland City Mission. This year sees Amelia studying her Masters in Creative Arts Therapy at Whitecliffe, and she continues her mahi alongside young people, women, refugee communities, and the homelessness community. Amelia talks with Adrian about their joint passion for theatre with marginalised communities.
So I'm sitting here this evening with Adrian Jackson, MBE, theatre practitioner and director from the United Kingdom, who was somebody that founded and was the former director of Cardboard Citizens Theatre Company for almost 30 years, just about, before stepping back last year. Cardboard Citizens produces work by, with and for those with lived experience of homelessness, inequity and poverty. For myself, my name's Amelia. I've been lucky enough to work alongside Hobson Street Theatre Company here in Tāmaki, Makaurau for the past 11 years, similarly producing theatre with people who have experienced homelessness. So along those lines, it's a joy to be chatting with you, Adrian. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you've been here in Aotearoa for a couple of weeks now, and we'll talk sort of about the whys of that in a moment. But firstly, you mentioned during a workshop last week that I was lucky enough to be a part of that whilst you're assuming the role of teacher on that day or facilitator, you acknowledge that you'd be learning from everyone in the room at the same time. And this sits really comfortably alongside a concept that we follow at Whitecliffe, and that's of ako, which is a te reo word for that back and forth learning, teaching relationship, reciprocity. So my first question is, what have you been learning since you arrived?
Oh, so much. I think more than anything, I've been struck by this historical moment that I seem to have happened upon, which is just so amazing, really, of this full embracing of what I think you call biculturality. And I just don't think I know I haven't met anything like that anywhere I've been before. I've been in quite a lot of countries. And I just think it's really fascinating. So that's what I've been learning about. Obviously, I've been learning quite a lot of Maori concepts, but there's just, it's a big journey, which I shall have to pursue more of. So I think that's been, apart from that, what have I learned? I've learned that this is a very beautiful country, and I've travelled in various parts of it, and that's been enjoyable. So, yeah.
Has it been your first trip?
It is my first trip.
Fabulous.
Yeah,
Welcome.
I'm coming back next year, as you know.
Yes.
So I regard this as a sort of scouting trip in all senses.
Brilliant. And did you come to that concept of ako, of learning back and forth quite early on in your career, or do you find it's something that you learned as you went along?
Well, it's great you've got a word for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Paulo Freirean concept of learning as a dialogue, as an exchange, and a reaction against the notion of sort of banked learning. And when did I come across that concept? I think I realized it was important to me about 20, 30 years ago, I suppose, and that I've never liked the notion of one group of people knowing more than another. I've always found that I want to meet people where they are, and that's the most interesting thing. Basically, I'm a left person, and the left suffers, or used to suffer certainly, from a notion of that it knew the truth and that it was just a matter of everybody else getting to know the truth. And I always found that somewhat problematic, which is why I was never a very good left person. And Boal and Freire offer a more democratic notion, which is not about I know the truth and I'm going to share it with you and then we'll do the revolution. It's about, what are you thinking about? What do you want to talk about?
And I wonder if that's where we sit now, the way the world's going, is that we've got, as I say, the sides are sort of, anyway, we're getting into politics. Let's not get into politics.
I don't know.
But you hit upon sort of 20, 30 years ago and talks about going back to the beginning. And I guess I want to know, after, I assume, theatre training, what led you down the social justice pathway towards wanting to formulate something like Cardboard Citizens and not into traditional theatre making?
I mean, I really don't make a big distinction between what I do and any other kind of theatre making. I really don't. And one of the things I'm going to talk about briefly tomorrow probably is there's this thing called applied theatre, which has been invented about 20 years ago. And now there are all these applied theatre courses around the world. So no, I've always believed that theatre's a good thing, that it's a powerful space. Boal articulates quite a lot of those things. He calls it the aesthetic space. And I suppose I just tapped into that. And, it's really random in a kind of way that it was, that Cardboard Citizens came into being. It could have been, Augusto Boal came to teach at a company I was associate director of, the London Bubble, in 1991, and immediately on the back of that we had applied for money to do a project to see would this Brazilian idea work in the UK. And we had a list of 30 oppressed groups, at least, and simply by a process of elimination and partly pragmatism we narrowed it down. It was 1991. There were a lot of homeless people on the street, as there are again now. And it seemed like the right issue. And a member of my team at the time, she had worked in that sector. So we didn't know absolutely nothing. We knew next to nothing.
And now you know.
Now I know a little bit more than next to nothing, but not much more.
Indeed. And theatre has been known. I guess what I'm thinking about is an audience that are not necessarily all creative arts therapists that have trained in theatre or learnt in theatre. They're visual artists, different kind of artists. So just in terms of the basics of theatre, you and I know that it's been known for its sort of cathartic nature for eons and in many different cultures. But I guess there you go. Yep. For those who are not sort of versed in that world, can you articulate what's the superpower of theatre? Do you think?
Well, can I articulate? I doubt it. But I mean, it's a very all-round experience. There are more things happening in it. You're assailed by your senses more of your senses are assailed than perhaps in any other art form. So many things are going on at once. It's live. It's very, very real. It's in front of you. You're in a room with other people having this experience. Those are all pretty powerful things. And then when you add to that the notion that the people in front of you might not be just actors, but people who have had interesting lives and might share some of that, that gives an added power to things, and you can play with that power and add to the theatre experience. So, I mean, I still love theatre. There's nothing worse than really bad theatre. There's nothing better than really good theatre, as far as I'm concerned.
You're here in Aotearoa for a research project titled The Precariat Whānau. In order to get it right, I thought I'd leave it to you to let me know what it's all about and your role in it.
Yeah, no, sweetly, this really interesting team of social scientists, I suppose, psychologists, are working on the notion of the precariat, and they're trying to understand what, this is a new word, but you sort of get it. People whose lives are lived precariously, i.e. from one day to the next, a small disaster might really tip them over the edge and they'll become homeless or destitute or whatever. And there are more and more people who live those lives because of the way the world is structured now with 0 hours and all that stuff. as you're probably aware, that population apparently in New Zealand disproportionately is constituted of people of Maori origin. So anyway, these guys are working on this thing, and they're producing lots of papers, and they're interviewing a lot of people, and it's really fascinating work. And I think they're interested in seeing how could they make their work have a wider effect than just being published in X or Y scientific journal, or thesis here or thesis there. And they've really embraced, I mean, I really admire the way they've embraced, for a start, they've embraced Hobson Street, and they really love and understand those guys and what powerful storytellers they are. And I think they've also really, from an early point, they were interested in theatre. This man, Rand Hazu, who's a theatre maker and lecturer here, has been influential on them. But I think the penny totally really dropped, and they were really glad that they could see that this information, this testimony, these statistics could more powerfully be embodied and delivered by means of theatre than anything else, to get it to a wider audience, to make it have more effect than on 10 academics. So yeah, it's been great.
That's sort of exactly sits in the pocket of the methodology of research that we look at, especially at Whitecliffe. It's arts-based research, because of the recognition that you want more than 3 or 5 or 10 academics to read it, and especially in that social field. You want people to view it and be affected by
use it.
And use it. And speaking of that, we study social justice, this lens which hopes to affect change on sort of societal level as well as an individual level. And for me, theatre is this perfect vehicle for this sometimes. And one of its tools is your speciality, Theatre of the Oppressed. You've mentioned this name Boal, Augusto Boal, for those who don't know, Brazilian man who I didn't know you'd actually...
I worked with him many times. I translated 5 of his books, and I worked with him many times, and obviously he's, a guru for me, really.
And this idea of the Theatre of the Oppressed, and then the Forum Theatre, which came from that, one of the ways in which to use it. You told a great story the other day about how that evolved really on stage, with a woman coming on the stage, and I wondered if you indulge us
with that
again
story.
With that story.
Okay. Well, this is a Boal story. I mean, it's the sort of origin myth of the Theatre of the Oppressed, of Forum Theatre, where he had evolved after passing through a form called simultaneous dramaturgy. Well, he was in a form called simultaneous dramaturgy, which involved the protagonist of a play reaching a point of crisis and the audience being invited to direct them what they should do next to get a better result. And this was a form of audience engagement, a very powerful form of audience engagement. And then Boal used to tell this story of a moment when Boal goes to an area and is working with his team. This must be in the early 70s, I guess. And he says, what do you want to make a play about? And a woman tells the story of her unfaithful partner who is having a house built for them out of town. And he's a bit of a ne'er-do-well. He's Jack the lad. He doesn't have a regular job. And she has a salary, and so she is the major contributor to the house building project. So she gets some money every week, and she pays him some money, which is payments for the house, which he is supervising the building of out of town. And she is not actually getting to see it because he wants it to be a surprise, though she knows she's paying for it. And she's very happy with all this, because if there was any sense of something not working, she has receipts. He gives her end of every week, end of every month, when she pays some money, he gives her a receipt. And these are really nice handwritten receipts. They're quite long. They're on really nice paper. They even smell nice. What could possibly be wrong with these? She's not ever read them because she's illiterate. She's not a lawyer or anything, but she can see that they're fine. And anyway, one evening, she and her husband have a big argument, and he storms off down to the pub, and she goes next door to her friend who can read, and she takes the receipts next door to her friend, and her friend goes through the receipts, and she says, after a bit, she says, these are love letters from your husband's mistress. So not only has he been two-timing her, but he has actually caused her to religiously, carefully keep his receipts on her behalf. So obviously she's pretty fed up about this. And so that's her question, really. What should she do? And so they make a play. And the play comes to the point exactly where she's returned from the next door neighbor, and she's sitting waiting for her husband to come back from the pub. And the audience have many suggestions. And somebody says she should lock him out, and then he'd learn the error of his ways. So she locks him out, and the husband actor, they play this out. The husband actor comes back, he knocks on the door, says, "Let me in." She says, "No, I know all about the mistress. I know it's not on. It's not going to happen." So he goes away, and he rings his mistress, and he says, "Oh, I've been thrown out. Can I come and stay at yours?" And she says, "Oh, yeah." So that's not a perfect solution from the wife's point of view, because she still actually loves the guy, believe it or not, or she still wants to have some kind of arrangement with him. And somebody else says she should move out, and she should move out. So the actress on the stage, she plays the part, she moves out. Husband actor comes home, opens the door, there's no one in. Comes into the flat, he rings up his mistress, says, "Hey, I've got the place to myself tonight. You want to come over and you can make me supper while you're at it?" And she does. And so that's another partial solution, but not really a very good solution. Anyway, they play these out, and many people get involved, and Boaz's very happy, and the audience is very motivated. And but there's one woman, a powerfully built woman in the front row, and she's really obviously not happy. And Boaz asks her, what are you unhappy about? And she says, what she should do is she should have a very clear conversation with the husband, and then she can forgive him. So the actor on the stage, Boaz directs them to do it. The actor on the stage comes on, the husband comes back, the woman says, "Look, we need to be really clear about this. I'm really unhappy, really pissed off about the way you've treated me." And the husband actor says, "Oh, I'm very, very sorry," and so on. Goes on for about 5 minutes. And then the woman says, "Okay, well, now we've had the clear conversation. I forgive you. I'll go and make the supper." And Boaz sort of pivots back to the woman, the big woman, and she's even unhappier than before. And he says, "Well, didn't we do what you said?" She said, "Well, you didn't do what I said. What I said was she should have a very clear conversation with him. Then she could forgive him." Boaz slightly afraid of this woman at this point, because she looks really livid and she's actually quivering, slightly vibrating. So he just, without question, he goes back to the actor and says, "Look, this time have a really, really clear conversation with him, and only then forgive him." So the actor does it again. She says, "I'm really not happy. Am I making myself clear? I know everything. Is it clear to you?" And he says, "Yeah, no, it's totally abundantly clear. I've never seen such clarity in my life. It's clear to me that I cannot continue in this way." And she says, "Well, I'm glad it's clear." And it goes on for about 5 minutes. And then she says, "Okay, well, now we've had this clear conversation. I forgive you. I'll go and put the dinner on." And Boaz goes back to the woman, and she's just furious. And he says, "Look, madam, if we're not doing what you want us to do, perhaps you would like to come on stage and show us what she should do." And she says, "May I?" She's on the stage like a shot. She grabs a broom from the side of the stage. The actor comes in, and she starts pulverizing him with this broom. And she says, never treat me like that again. I know everything," and so on. It's over in seconds, even before they can intervene. The actor is a pulp on the floor. And then she says, "Okay." She sits down. She says, now we've had this clear conversation. Go and make my dinner. And it's a good story.
It's a great story.
It's the origin of Forum Theatre, and in Boal's telling of it, that is the moment in which Forum Theatre was born, which involves the audience coming on stage, not the audience directing an actor vicariously to do what they want in their place, but the audience member themselves coming on stage and offering their own intervention. And never look back.
Oh, look, I appreciate the retelling. I love it because stories are, what are we but our stories? And it really clearly shows also that self-agency of this woman who actually, she's like, you're not quite getting it, here's what would work for me. And
I think we can assume the actor really wasn't seriously damaged and that she knew she was performing. I mean, one of the things, of course, in Forum is, people often ask, are people violent? Well, not really, because they know they're on stage and they're playing and they're performing and they're telling a story. So it's not like people are possessed by a kind of psychotic madness. They do what they do, but they're in the context of theatre. Sometimes people get quite, almost carried away with it, but they.
And then that's the practitioner's job, right? The facilitator, to hold the space.
Hold the space, as they say.
Yeah, no, lovely. Thank you. At Hobson Street, pretty early on, the cast let us know that they didn't necessarily want to tell and retell their worst story, their street story. Funnily enough, we used to say, we're not doing the cardboard story again, And yeah, I guess I sort of know your opinion, but I'll ask you here. I guess there's something about just not those stories, just amplifying the voices, the telling of the story, and having the audience there, no matter what the story is, no matter what they're talking about. It's actually having an audience that hasn't traditionally been there, watching people who have lead different lives to them, performing something, and the transaction that goes on there, rather than the story of. And I think, for years when I would step in and talk to the media before our cast would comfortable to do that themselves, that was often a job to sort of just say, look, we're tired of telling those stories. Do you tell the worst thing that ever happened to you over and over again? So I think it's really important to distinguish where the power often is just in the telling of a story. I guess just, your thoughts on that, the power of what it is other than telling the worst story of your life over and over.
I mean, for me, it was really important from a really long time, from the beginning, that, I'm an artist. I am not tabula rasa. I am there. I am part of it. I am not simply, whatever that would be, a facilitator. I don't know what that would mean, honestly. I'm interested in telling stories with complexity and depth and subtlety and wit. And so the people I collaborated with over the years, and that was what we did. I'm really not interested in sort of poverty porn. I'm not interested in the sort of prurient interest that people have in this sort of exoticization of the other lives. But I am interested in the power of experiences shared. And art is a filter. Art is a, one of those mirrors which diverts, or whatever. I can't think what they're called. And the moment you go from the I to the he, she, or they, the moment you tell a story and remove it from the I and you put it in the third person, it changes its meaning. It's a Brechtian device. And what I realized quite early on was that the people with lived experience I worked with had a power because people were slightly in awe of them for all those reasons. And one could leverage that power, but not by them telling their own stories, unless they absolutely wanted to, in which case they've become an artist of complete self-agency, a performance artist or whatever, but by them telling stories which could be theirs, and who would know. And if the audience wanted to, make the projection that it was their story, well and good. If it added to the power of the storytelling, it never was their story directly, but if it made the audience think more, well, fine. So artwork's at one remove, unless of course it is, and some of the people I worked with, have gone on to be considerable artists in their own right, and then of course they can choose what they want to tell and what they don't want to tell. So that's my line on all that. And it's just art, it's just theatre, and it's really just a very close relation of all the other kinds of art and theatre that are around. What's the difference? Maybe there's a difference in that it's thought about its ethics quite a lot more, perhaps. It's more entangled with social justice, with notions of that. It perhaps more openly is interested in catalyzing change, but beyond that, it's just theatre.
And I think we always were working at that straddle of making theatre that's just good theatre, just a good show to go and see, and along the way you're having people interact and see and perform.
Something may happen, something may not happen.
Indeed.
People's lives may change, they may not change.
Yep.
Same as when any of us go to a good piece of theatre or take part in something, it's not like a magic pill. Who knows? No,
we often would get the remark from audiences, what audiences enjoyed, a lot from Hobson Street is sort of a real lack of pretension in performers that are just
and wit.
Great wit, very funny, sort of dark humour, and just drop all pretenses and just raw storytelling, just enjoyable because it's a loveliness and the simplicity of it, really, just the storytelling, and not years and years perhaps of someone desperate to be an actor or make a star, just stories being shared. Come to the end.
The end of your piece of paper.
It is. What's next for you? Where do you head after this?
What do you mean? Physically, geographically?
Geographically. After Fair Shores of New Zealand.
Yeah, no, it's been
what's
really
next
nice.
for you?
I'm going back to London for a week, and then interestingly, I'm going to the University of Tübingen in Germany to work for a week with some medical ethicists, which is so cool. And, a real privilege again to just meet people thinking and talking about important stuff, and offer, the theatre tool to them to see whether they can use it and whether it helps them think a bit differently. So that's exciting. And then I should plug this. I am starting a School of the Theatre of the Oppressed in London, which is where I will be teaching every year and inviting lots of interesting folk from around the world to teach all that work, which I used to do at Garbled Citizens every year, and I've taught in many countries, and it's nice to do. And so that is called STOP, School of Theatre of the Oppressed.
Yes.
It only works if you capitalize the first two letters of oppressed, but you can do that. Yeah. STOP.
Fabulous.
Because, as you know, that is the thing that when you watch a forum play and it comes to the forum part, the interventions, the audience is invited to shout stop when they see a moment where they feel that the central character could usefully do something different. So that's the gag.
Brilliant.
Got it?
Great gag.
Yeah,
now I know I'm
it's
booking my
gag.
tickets to the UK.
Do please.
Brilliant.
Yeah. No, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
We're going to have some fantastic teachers from all around the world. The first one we have billed is a wonderful man called Hena Lon, who's a very old friend, who co-runs something called Combatants for Peace in Israel, Palestine, with a Palestinian colleague, Noor Shahada, and he will be teaching a version of Boal's work called the polarized theatre of the oppressed, which is particularly applied to that moment where there are these two very polar opposite groups who really find it difficult to understand each other or empathize with each other. So it just shows the incredible versatility of Auguste Boal's work, that can be applied in all these different
It still does today.
situations. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Adrian.
Thanks for listening. This podcast was produced by Amanda Levy and Vic Segedin, music by Kathy Manning. JoCat is in the process of building up its podcast resource. If you have an idea for a podcast that would be of interest to other creative arts therapists, please get in touch through our website. You can listen to JoCat podcasts through the JoCat website or the JoCat YouTube channel.